Anyway, let's get into the show.
Coffee.
And our first big topic is FIFA announces the World Cup schedule for 2026. And I think the big news right off the top is that MetLife in New Jersey will be hosting the final. And I have some comments and thoughts on that. And then the U.S. men's national team group, their group stage schedule is set. June 12th, they're going to play in L.A. June 19th, they're going to go up the coast and play in Seattle. And then June 25th, instead of going across the country or in the Midwest or anywhere else, they're going back to L.A., which I kind of love because I'm on the West Coast, so I got no problem with it whatsoever. But those are the big, I'd say, takeaways of this. I will also mention that once, because it goes, you have your 12 groups of 4, and then you have the top 2 go advance, and the 8 best third-place teams will all go into the round of 32. So there's a new knockout rounds. So it takes you 8 games to win the World Cup now instead of 7. Then you have round of 16. And then when it hits the quarterfinals, there's no more games in Mexico or the West Coast at all. Everything is either Midwest or East Coast. So I know the East Coast and Midwesters are a little pissed about how that's all playing out initially for especially as a U.S. men's national team perspective. However, they ultimately get the biggest of the biggest games, and hopefully the U.S. is playing in those. Jesse, I'll come to you first. What are you feeling about MetLife hosting the final?
Yeah, I kind of figured that New York was going to be the location for the final, especially since last time it was in Los Angeles. It kind of seemed like it was setting up that way. I had also heard that most likely the meaningful last matches were all going to be played in the U.S., and that in some ways the U.S., Mexico, Canada ability to sell it all together was part of the package, but that they knew that most of the revenue and most of the big games would be played in the U.S. So that's kind of how it's played itself out. So I think it's a lot of travel for the U.S. I think that's one of the things that you're always thinking about is okay, what is the layout and setup for matches, and where do you have to go? So a lot of teams will have a lot of travel given that it's in Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. So, yeah, it sets up to be a physically grueling, with the heat, with the travel, with elevation at times, sets up to be a grueling World Cup for all the teams. So it'll be interesting to see how physically teams manage that.
I think what's interesting about this is what you mentioned is the heat. Like, why would you consider a location? Because Dallas seemed like it was a nice fit. They can control the temperature because it's covered at the AT&T Stadium, and then you're gonna, I don't know, I think it's just gonna potentially lessen the final. These guys are already gonna be tired. It's their 8th game in 30 days or 29 days or whatever, and then you're gonna make them play because you have to play in the middle of the day. That way, it gets the most people watching around the world. I don't know, Chuck. What are your thoughts on the final in New York?
I love it. Okay. Obviously, being a East Coaster, I think it's great. New Jersey, New York, it's the hub of the universe. It feels like that was always, in my mind, the favorite, although Dallas, I think, had a good shout because of the space it has. Like you said, the stadium's brand new. It's beautiful. It can control the temperature better. And obviously they have the space. So I thought it was going to go to Dallas just because of that alone, but come on, you can't beat Jersey, New York, that whole vibe. It feels like it's the most cultural international city. It's easy to get to. So I'm excited about that. With the U.S. men's national team playing 2 games in LA and 1 in Seattle, I think it bodes for them well because of the temperature. I think the climate won't be as bad as if they were playing in, Miami or Texas. So I think from that standpoint, the group stage, it'll be nice for everybody on the West Coast to get a chance to watch the U.S. men's national team. And then the important games, you come out East. So I'm all for it. I can't wait for this tournament. I'm so excited. I know obviously the first big step is Copa America, and that'll be our first true test with this group ahead of the 2026 World Cup.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I do think, and Jesse, I want to get your thoughts on this. If you were leading the team in 26, in terms of where you gain your advantages, you're the host country. So how do you take the most out of that and get the most out of that? I know there's been some talk that the team's going to be training in Atlanta in that brand new facility that they're building. And so why would we want to move away from that to go somewhere else and obviously not expose the team in guaranteed games around the country, like have one Midwest, we'll have one East Coast, have one West Coast. But I agree with Chuck. I think there's a huge advantage to gain by playing in temperatures that are a little bit more moderate and in areas where you know that you could take advantage of it. Doesn't necessarily guarantee you anything, but it does put you in a better position to potentially get results. And so I wanted your thoughts on Greg's decision or U.S. Soccer's decision to get all these games on the West.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I meant is knowing that their training camp is in Atlanta. Maybe they're going to set up a West Coast camp somewhere, which would make sense. There's been different teams that do elevation training at different places, and then they come to the World Cup. The biggest factor will be the heat and humidity. Even when you talk about Europeans, when I coached even at Salzburg and we had to play a Champions League play-in at Tel Aviv, and it was like 85 at kickoff at 10 o'clock at night, the players melted. The European players are not used to playing in those kinds of temperatures, in that kind of humidity. And what you see is just their bodies can't handle it. Often I would think about whether it was playing down in Mexico or whether we went down to Tel Aviv. Like Scandinavian players, it's almost impossible for them to manage what those temperatures are like. Then if you talk about Central American, South American, African players, they're a lot more used to playing in these kinds of temperatures, and their bodies naturally can handle it because they grew up there. They trained in that kind of humidity. So that winds up, the heat is a big factor, but it's often the humidity that zaps the players. So how you physically prepare yourself for the tournament winds up being a big factor in what kind of success you can have.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see even the lead up to that, because most of the players are in a European season and they roll right in from that. 10 months of grinding that out, trying to go as far as they can in multiple competitions, especially the best players in the world, usually on the best teams, who are usually at the end of all those competing for the trophies, rolling right into a World Cup where it could be quite difficult. So maybe that plays into the U.S.'s hands. I don't know. I do want to say that Philly is hosting a game on the 4th of July, and it's America's 250th birthday. So that's pretty rad to have it there. Also, it's insane. Dallas is going to have 9 games. They have the most. They're hosting 9 games for the tournament, including a semifinal. New York, New Jersey is 8 games, and they're including the final. Atlanta has got 8 games as well. They're doing a semi. LA's got 8. They're going to have a quarterfinal. Miami has 7. They're going to have a third-place playoff and a quarterfinal. Boston, so right in Chuck's backyard, 7, including the quarterfinal. Vancouver gets 7 games.
Shout out to the Crafts. They did the job. Shout out to the Crafts. Let's go.
Crafts doing work behind the scenes. KC has 6 games, including the quarterfinal. So shout out to my former club in that area. They have a huge soccer base there. It's a cool soccer fan base, I should say. Toronto 6, Philly 6, San Francisco 6, Seattle 6, Mexico City 5, Guadalajara 4, Monterrey 4. Now, some of those cities will also be getting some round of 32 and round of 16 games, but I just wanted to mention the quarterfinals and beyond. Do you think we can afford tickets anyway? I don't even know if it's going to be. I saw Kim Kardashian on the show. I'm like, yes, I'm glad she can afford tickets, but I don't know about the rest of us lay people out here.
Well, let's address that first. U.S. Soccer, you got 3 former U.S. internationals. Tickets better be coming. That's all I know. I'll do whatever it takes. Whatever
They're
you need.
not coming.
Hey, they got to be. I'll be working.
I think the only one that we'll be able to get them for are probably Madagascar versus Liechtenstein. But you never know. It could be. You just don't know who's going to make a 48-team field.
Hey, we're going to have full coverage of that match here on Call It What You Want.
Yeah.
Madagascar versus Liechtenstein, live from the stadium. All right. So Jesse, because of this game that I mentioned before in Philly on July 4th, the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country, if you were coaching the U.S., what would you say to the guys? And we were playing in that game. What would you say to the guys in that moment?
One of the coolest experiences I had was we went to South Korea in 2001, December of 2001, to play against South Korea right before the 2002 World Cup in Korea and Japan. And I was on the team then. And we actually took Chinook helicopters from Jeju, which is a small island they call the Hawaii, off the end of the peninsula, all the way up to the DMZ to meet with our military that were stationed there in the DMZ. And we met a lot of the people there. We actually went across the border into North Korea, flew back down. And then we had and this was, again, if you remember this timing, this was also 3 months after 9/11. And so we had a general named General Schwartz come down, and if you meet a 4-star, he was a 4-star general. If you meet a 4-star general or you meet a president or a vice president, when you meet them, they give you a coin. So I have a coin that they passed out to us right before the match, and the general gave a pregame speech to the team. And one of the things he said is, gentlemen, wins are important to our country right now. And, if you can capture that feeling of after 9/11, it kind of sent chills through all of us. And so, you do have these moments where I think as a country, we have a great history. We have great pride in what our history is, and opportunities to show that, to exemplify that in the way that we play our sport, I think is really important. So, yeah, I mean, that'll be interesting for sure. To continue the story, we actually went out and lost 1-0 to Korea. But they had a pretty good team.
Did you have to give your coin back? Did you hand back your coin?
I got to meet President Bush. He didn't give me a coin.
He didn't, huh?
No. What the hell?
I got
gypped on a coin.
Different presidents. So yeah, you get a little coin.